Have you ever noticed how you can hold it together all day? Answer emails, smile at strangers, laugh at the right moments, and then the second you're finally alone, something inside you just cracks? The tears come out of nowhere. Or maybe they've been waiting patiently all along. And if someone were to ask you later, "Are you okay?" you'd probably say yes. Not because you're lying exactly, but because explaining the truth feels harder than swallowing it. Most people assume that crying alone means you're weak, overwhelmed, or secretly falling apart. That if you don't cry in front of others, it must mean you're emotionally closed off or afraid of vulnerability. But psychology paints a very different picture. And once you see it, you might realize that crying alone isn't a flaw at all. It's a strategy. Quiet, deeply human one. Let me take you into a familiar scene. You're lying in bed at night. The lights are off. Your phone is face down. The world has finally stopped asking things from you. And that's when your brain, which has been behaving all day like a professional customer service agent, clocks out. The mask drops. The thoughts you've been holding back step forward. The memories get louder. The "I'm fine" starts to dissolve. And suddenly you're crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let the pressure leak out. People who cry alone often don't do it because they don't trust others. They do it because they trust themselves. Somewhere along the way, they learned how to self-regulate their emotions internally. Psychologists call this emotional containment. It's the ability to hold strong feelings without letting them spill into situations where they might feel unsafe, misunderstood, or burdensome. To the outside world, this looks like strength, calm, composure. But inside, it's more like holding a snow globe steady all day long, knowing that if you shake it even a little, everything will swirl. Your brain is incredibly smart about timing. When you're around other people, especially if you've grown up having to be the strong one, your nervous system stays on guard. You're in what psychology calls a socially regulated state. You monitor your tone, your expressions, your reactions. You read the room. You stay composed. But when you're alone, your brain finally decides it's safe enough to let go. The crying isn't a breakdown. It's a release valve. There's also something deeply protective happening here. Crying alone gives you control. Control over how much you show, when you show it, and to whom. For many people, especially those who were emotionally invalidated earlier in life, crying in front of others feels risky. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive. Maybe your tears were ignored. Maybe they were used against you. So your mind learned a simple rule. Feel everything, but do it privately. It's not that you don't want connection. It's that your nervous system doesn't associate vulnerability with safety yet. Interestingly, research on emotional regulation shows that people who delay emotional expression until they're alone often have higher self-awareness. They can name what they're feeling. They can sit with it. They don't immediately act it out. That's not emotional suppression. That's emotional pacing. It's the difference between shoving emotions into a locked basement and placing them gently on a shelf, knowing you'll come back for them later. Think of it like carrying a heavy backpack. You don't drop it in the middle of a crowded street. You wait until you're home. You take it off. You stretch your shoulders. You breathe. Crying alone is the emotional equivalent of finally putting the bag down. There's also a myth that people who cry alone don't want help. Often the opposite is true. They want help deeply. They just don't want to be a burden. Many of them are highly empathetic. They're used to being the listener, the supporter, the stable one. And when it's their turn to hurt, their instinct is to protect others from that weight. So they carry it quietly. They tell themselves, "I'll deal with this later." And later becomes that private moment with tears in the dark. Your brain also processes emotions differently when you're alone. Without social pressure, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for impression management, relaxes. This allows deeper emotional processing from the limbic system. In simpler terms, when no one is watching, your feelings get permission to be honest. That's why the tears feel different when you're alone. They're not performative. They're not edited. They're raw data. And here's something fascinating. Crying alone can actually be more regulating than crying in front of others for certain people. Studies show that crying triggers the release of oxytocin and endorphins, chemicals associated with soothing and bonding. When you cry alone, your brain becomes both the child and the caregiver. You hurt and you comfort yourself at the same time. That ability often develops in people who had to emotionally mature early. People who learned, consciously or not, I can handle this. Of course, this doesn't mean it's always healthy. There's a thin line between private processing and emotional isolation. The key difference lies in what happens after. Do you feel lighter once the tears pass? More grounded? More clear? Or do you feel stuck, numb, or ashamed for having emotions at all? Crying alone becomes harmful only when it's paired with self-judgment, when you tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way, when you treat your own tears like a secret flaw instead of a signal. Many people who cry alone also have a strong inner dialogue. You might replay conversations in your head. Imagine alternative endings. Rewrite moments you wish had gone differently. Your mind is constantly trying to make sense of emotional experiences. Crying becomes part of that meaning-making process. It's your psyche saying, this mattered, this hurt, pay attention. Culturally, we don't give enough credit to quiet emotional expression. We celebrate public vulnerability, the dramatic confession, the visible breakdown. But there's a quieter kind of courage in letting yourself feel without an audience. In not needing validation for your pain to be real. In sitting with yourself even when you're uncomfortable company. If this is you, you might notice that you're incredibly functional in crisis. When something goes wrong, you handle it. You problem solve. You stay calm. And then days later, alone in your room, the tears finally arrive, confused and late to the party. That's because your brain prioritizes survival first, processing second. You do what needs to be done. Then, when it's safe, you feel. There's something almost philosophical about this pattern. It suggests a deep respect for emotional truth. You don't rush it. You don't fake it. You wait until it's real. And when it comes, you let it come fully. The danger is when you start believing that because you cry alone, you have to handle everything alone. That's not what your tears are saying. They're not asking you to isolate. They're asking you to listen, to notice patterns, to ask yourself, what keeps bringing me back to this quiet moment of release? Sometimes the bravest thing isn't crying alone. It's letting one safe person see you before the tears turn into silence. But even then, understand this, there is nothing broken about you for feeling deeply in private. It means you have an inner world rich enough to need space. It means your emotions aren't shallow or fleeting. They linger, they echo, they deserve attention. And you give them that even if no one else sees it. So the next time you find yourself wiping your face in the dark, don't rush to judge yourself. Don't tell yourself you're weak or dramatic or too much. You're not. You're human. You're processing. You're releasing. You're doing emotional maintenance in the only way your nervous system knows how right now. And maybe, just maybe, those quiet tears are proof of something gentle and strong inside you. A part of you that refuses to go numb. A part of you that still cares. Still feels, still hopes. If this resonated, sit with it for a moment. Reflect on it. Maybe even write about it. And if you feel like it, share your thoughts in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people cry alone and think they're the only ones. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden logic behind human behavior, you know where to find me.